Daddy, please. The whisper cut through the roar of the crowd like a blade, carried not on the air, but directly into Adrian Cole's chest. He froze under the searing glare of the stage lights, yellow rubber gloves still clinging to his hands, a damp rag draped over one shoulder. 500 people in the Ryman Auditorium had turned their heads, their applause and chatter suspended midair. 2 million eyes were locked on him through glowing screens, waiting, judging. Come up here, now. Veronica Dane's voice sliced through the auditorium like frost over a mirror. Her smile was pristine, polished to perfection, but her eyes carried a knife's edge. She had a way of making an ordinary sentence feel like a sentence. Adrian's throat tightened. The rag in his hand felt impossibly heavy. He'd been cleaning the stage just 10 minutes earlier, wiping away the crumbs and smudges of preparation, and now somehow he was center stage, the object of 1,000 curious glances. "Oh, show us, prove yourself," Veronica commanded, stepping forward with the practiced grace of someone used to having power bend to her will. Her sequined gown sparkled under the harsh spotlights, the sheen of wealth and fame shimmering around her like a halo. Adrian's heart thundered in his chest. The last time he'd faced a crowd like this, it had been as a hopeful singer on a televised talent competition. That Adrian had been a different man, full of dreams, unscarred by grief, unaware that one phone call could unravel everything. Now the man under the lights was exhausted, hollowed by years of loss. His wife had been gone for 5 years, taken by an illness he could never forgive himself for missing in her final moments. His daughter, Lily, a fragile whisper of a child, clutched at his memory with every breath she drew in the hospital. And here he was, standing before a living, breathing monument of fame, expected to perform, expected to bend to her narrative. He stepped forward, each movement deliberate, slow, as if measuring the space between himself and the edge of the stage, between himself and the abyss of exposure. The gloves squeaked slightly against the polished wood, a faint, almost embarrassing sound that somehow felt monumental in the silence. He tightened his grip on the rag, as though it could anchor him to reality, a lifeline against the suffocating weight of judgment. Whether you can sing, or whether you're just taking up space here, Veronica's voice lowered, sharp and almost cruel. Everyone will see. The band behind her stirred at her signal, a subtle cue, a promise of the note that had once earned her millions. The audience leaned in, breaths held, fingers hovering over screens. Adrian closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, and in that instant he heard it, the voice of Lily, fragile and trembling, asking him for something beyond music, courage, truth, love. And just like that, the stage of shadows became the crucible where the past and present collided, where a janitor and a father would be tested not by applause, but by integrity, by the quiet ferocity of a heart refusing to break. The scent of polish and stage dust hung in the air, mingling with the faint hum of a rehearsal drifting from the auditorium above. Adrian Cole pushed his cleaning cart slowly down the empty corridor, the wheels whispering against the worn wooden floor. Each sweep of the mop traced a rhythm he had once known intimately, though now it was a rhythm of survival rather than song. Years ago, his voice had commanded attention, echoing through sold-out theaters and recording studios. The world had leaned in, enchanted by his tone, the vulnerability threading every note like a secret confession. Critics called him a rising star, the kind of singer who could make a room weep or a heart soar. But life, relentless in its unpredictability, had other plans. His wife, Elise, had fallen ill when Lily was just a newborn, a fragile bloom in the middle of a storm. Adrian had been faced with impossible choices, Fame or family, applause or quiet devotion, each stage light he had once adored became a memory of absence, each note a reminder of the lullabies he needed to sing instead. He had walked away from contracts, from cameras, from a life that could have been legendary, to cradle a baby with a fragile heart and a wife slipping quietly from the world. Now music lived in smaller sacred spaces. In the soft rustle of sheets, as he tucked Lily into bed, he hummed melodies only she could hear. His fingers traced her fine hair as if brushing away the worries of the world, and she would snuggle closer, trusting the sound of his voice more than any medicine. "Daddy," again, she would whisper, and he would hum until her eyelids fluttered shut, the notes wrapping around her like a shield. Backstage, the corridors were empty, yet alive with echoes. Each footstep, each squeak of a cartwheel resonated in Adrian's memory, reminding him of what he had sacrificed and what he had gained. He scrubbed the floors with a kind of reverence, polishing not just the wood, but the fragments of a life paused, waiting quietly for moments of joy. Music had not abandoned him, it had simply transformed. The song now was in the quiet, the rhythm of Lily's breathing, the soft clasp of her tiny hand in his, the unspoken promises whispered across the pale walls of their home. He paused by a window, staring at the fading light outside, and for a moment the stage lights from years past flickered in his mind. He remembered the exhilaration of applause, the thrill of a note perfectly held, and the ache of leaving it all behind. Yet the memories were no longer bittersweet. They were threads in a tapestry that connected him to something far deeper than fame: love, responsibility, and the fragile miracle of life he had sworn to protect. Adrian brushed a strand of hair from Lily's forehead as he recalled a line he once sang: "Even in silence, hearts can speak." And it was true. In the stillness, in the small routines, he had found a life richer than any stage could offer. His past, once full of echoes of unfulfilled dreams, now resonated in the quiet devotion of a father who had chosen the truest melody of all: love. The spotlight on stage was blinding, burning a halo around Veronica Dane as she moved with effortless grace. Her voice soared, controlled, immaculate, too immaculate. Adrian stood just beyond the stage curtain, cleaning gloves clenched in his fists, heart hammering with a mix of fear and fury. He had watched her countless times on screens, heard the praise, read the reviews, but tonight his ears, sharpened by years of melody, caught the tiny imperfections masked by technology, the backing track subtly drowning her true voice, the tiny digital echoes that betrayed human limitation. He remembered the interviews where she had sneered at fledgling singers, dismissed them as untalented, naive, unworthy, and he had believed her then, stepping back into silence for the sake of his family. But now, standing inches away from the truth, the injustice hit him like a cold gust. Lily's whispered words earlier that day echoed in his mind, soft but insistent. "Daddy, tell them what's real." She trusted him. That trust anchored him, turning the swirl of anger into quiet resolve. Not confrontation fueled by revenge. No, this was a father protecting his child, protecting the integrity of truth itself. He stepped onto the stage, his janitor's uniform stark under the bright lights. The audience murmured, cameras panned, and Veronica's smile faltered slightly. Her carefully constructed world was shifting under him. Every step he took was deliberate, measured. The mop he carried was no longer a tool of menial labor. It was a symbol of his journey, of patience, of the quiet courage built over years of whispered lullabies and unseen sacrifices. He paused, glancing toward the VIP section where Lily sat, her small hand gripping her mother's picture tightly. His gaze softened, and he drew a deep breath. Then, in the stillness between songs, Adrian spoke, calm, precise, his voice steady. Veronica, your voice is beautiful, but it isn't entirely yours. A hush swept through the crowd. Gasps, flashes of cameras, the shifting weight of hundreds of eyes focused on a man in a janitor's uniform. Veronica's face tightened, the practiced poise cracking. The carefully engineered perfection she had relied upon now shimmered like a fragile glass sculpture, ready to shatter. Adrian didn't need to shout, didn't need to humiliate. The revelation was devastating in its subtlety. He simply pointed to the screens, the backing track meters, the evidence of digital enhancement hidden in plain sight. The audience saw it for themselves, a quiet human realization. Brilliance had been fabricated. He looked down at Lily, her wide eyes reflecting awe rather than fear. The truth had been revealed, not as scandal, not as spectacle, but as something far more intimate, far more human. Adrian's motives were not ambition, not revenge. They were love, protection, the survival of innocence in a world obsessed with appearances. And in that silent understanding, a seed was planted. Perhaps the voice that had been silent for years, the one that sang lullabies to a fragile child, could finally sing again, unshackled by fear, truth guiding the first note. Adrian's hands trembled slightly as he stepped fully into the center of the stage, leaving behind the guise of a janitor. The lights that had once felt like a weight now seemed like a spotlight for truth itself. He inhaled deeply, feeling the familiar ache in his chest, the same one that had both haunted and protected him for years, and then let it settle. The hum of the audience, the soft click of cameras, the invisible pressure of millions online faded into a single clarity. He was singing for Lily, for the love he had carried silently through countless nights. He opened his mouth, and the first note floated into the air, raw and unpolished, but alive. Each subsequent note bore the story of every sleepless night beside a hospital crib, every whispered lullaby, every sacrifice made to protect the fragile heart of his daughter. The sound was not meant to impress critics, not to chase fame. It was pure, urgent, human. His voice quivered with emotion at first, then steadied, swelling with courage. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the authenticity that no digital track could manufacture. Veronica Dane, poised and composed just moments ago, faltered. Her eyes widened as she realized the stark contrast between Adrian's live, living voice and her perfected artificial performance. There was no theatrics in his tone, just honesty, bravery, and love. The screens behind them, still flashing the digitally enhanced version of her performance, seemed almost hollow now. The facade had crumbled without a single word of accusation. The room held its breath as Adrian carried each note, the melody weaving between the audience, touching hearts in unexpected ways. Lily's small hand gripped her mother's photograph, her eyes shining with tears, but also with relief. Her father's courage had built a bridge between fear and safety, showing her that love could endure even the harshest trials. As the final note lingered in the charged silence, the audience erupted, not in mockery, not in judgment, but in a stunned, empathetic applause. Their reaction was not just for Adrian's skill, but for the story behind it, the quiet heroism, the devotion that had made this performance possible. Veronica lowered her gaze, no words left to defend the illusion she had relied on for so long. Adrian knelt beside Lily, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're safe," he whispered. And in that simple phrase, the weight of years fell away, replaced by the warmth of belonging, trust, and the reassurance of a father's unwavering love. For Adrian, music was no longer a lost dream, it was a language of healing. Each note he had once silenced now spoke freely, carrying the journey of a life defined by courage and care. As the lights dimmed, father and daughter stood together, their shadows stretching across the stage, calm and unbroken. The final frame lingered on them, two hearts, intertwined by trials, now basking in the quiet triumph of truth and love. The melody faded gently, leaving warmth, closure, and hope that would echo long after the curtains fell.